3 weeks had come and gone. Your mental evaluation shocked the psychologist who had questioned you last time. You'd made undeniable progress. The PTSD remained an issue, true, but you were definitely progressing with Aizawa looking after you. Aizawa, looking classy in his fitted suit, signed the adoption papers. The witnesses and social workers signed them as well. You skipped happily next to Dad. Finally, the adoption was official, and it felt right in every way. Mike was waiting for the two of you when you exited the building, wearing a goofy grin with a camera around his neck.
Mike?
Aizawa frowned. Not just me, Mike grinned. Midnight stepped out from behind Mike, and Aizawa glowered. You watched the interaction with wide, curious eyes. You'd never seen Midnight before. Midnight's eyes fastened on you, and she seemed to glow with giddiness. Shota, she is so cute! She gushed. Then she whirled on Aizawa, fixing him with an evil glare. How could you keep this youthful energy from me, Shota? You told Hizashi first? You quirked an eyebrow at Aizawa, as though to ask, is she always like this? Aizawa glowered, carefully pushing Midnight's shoulder to get her out of his personal space. Midnight's interpretation of events was incorrect. He hadn't told Mike. Mike had found out on his own, in the most annoying way possible. Mike, he growled, why are you and Midnight here? I figured you needed someone to take pictures to mark the occasion, Shota.
Isn't that a one-person job?
I suck at photography, you know that, so I brought Nemori. Aizawa radiated irritation.
We don't need photographs.
Come on, Sho. Even if you don't want them, Eiko might want photos when she's older. Aizawa glanced at you. You looked on with the same curious gaze. He sighed.
Fine.
Description of the photos taken. Photo 1. You standing next to an almost smiling Aizawa, holding his hand and grinning brightly with your eyes squinted shut. Photo 2. Aizawa glancing down at your bright grin, the corners of his mouth pulling up a bit in amusement. Photo 3. Mike in the distant background, photobombing, with rock-on hand gestures. Photo 4. Aizawa turning to scowl at Mike, who is now doing a TikTok dance as he photobombs. Photo 5. Aizawa glaring and gripping the shirt collar of an unrepentantly grinning Mike, you in the very near foreground, peering curiously into the camera lens. Photo 6. Midnight taking a spontaneous selfie with you. Aizawa yelling at Mike in the background. Perfect! Midnight chirped. Especially the last one. I think I got all of us in it. Dad? You asked as the two of you drove home, having managed to get away from Mike and Midnight. You were exploding with happiness, but Aizawa seemed especially hard to read right now. You wanted to know if he felt it too. Are you happy? He glanced at you, seeing your wide, earnest eyes as you awaited his answer.
Well, I never wanted a kid.
He considered aloud, but you saw the gleam of humor in his eye, and you began to smile hesitantly.
And, he continued, I'll probably have to keep getting you out of trouble, and waking up at night for you, and picking up your hair ties and guitar picks around the house.
Oh yeah, you thought. You kept forgetting where you put those. You liked to tie your hair back, when cleaning or when doing homework that required a lot of thinking. He turned to look at you, and the expression in his eyes softened more than you'd ever seen.
But if you ask me to think of a specific moment when I've been happier than right now, I can't think of one.
You smiled, feeling warm. I think this is what home feels like, you thought. Your mind began to wander happily. Hey, Dad? He smirked.
Another question?
Well, remember when I protected Shinso?
Yes.
I've been thinking, maybe I do want to be a hero someday. You held your breath for his reaction.
If that's your dream, then I'll do what I can to help you reach it.
You grinned brighter than the sun. Thanks, Dad. I'll learn hard.
Learn hard?
Aizawa chuckled to himself.
All right, then.
He was mock serious.
You'd better.
He considered your goal. Pro hero. A hazardous career. It might be nice if you went a different route, but you definitely had potential. If you continued to want it, he'd support you however he could. The next few days went uneventfully. Mike taught you another guitar lesson on Tuesday. Shinzo came with you and Aizawa to run errands on Wednesday. The car wash was especially fun, and you were especially excited on Thursday because you'd been invited to Shinzo's for his mom's birthday dinner. Even though it would probably just be the three of them, since Aizawa had politely declined due to a UA meeting, you wanted to look your best. "Dad!" you yelled. "Can you do my hair?" Aizawa eyed you. Your hair grew in untamable dark waves, with bits curling up or sticking out almost at random. Your hopeful gaze waited for his answer, like usual. "Yes," he sighed. You happily sat down in front of his chair, where he'd been grading papers, and handed him your hairbrush and hair ties. He took the brush and hair ties from you, beginning to gently unknot the ends of your hair, working his way up smoothly. Most dads are not known for their skill in doing their daughter's hair. But that's because most dads have short hair. Aizawa, on the other hand, had long hair himself. On many occasions he needed to style it to look professional or pull it back for convenience, so he knew how to work with long hair. He continued brushing your hair, working through snarls and knots so gently that it didn't hurt, and brushing carefully around your ears. Your eyes closed in happiness as he gave it all a final brush through now that the tangles were gone. "How do you want me to do it?" "I don't know. You choose," you replied contentedly. At this point, you were simply enjoying having your hair played with. Aizawa continued brushing while he decided. Eventually, he brushed your hair into 2 low pigtails and secured them with elastic ties. "Thanks, Dad!" you exclaimed delightedly as you looked at the result in the mirror. Your hair seemed a little tamer and smoother, although still curling and waving loosely in the 2 pigtails. You liked how they were positioned low, so as to not interfere with your cat ears. Aizawa half smiled, looking tired and chill. "Here." He held out the hairbrush to give it back. As you reached out to take it, something very strange happened. Your fingers curled into a fist on some instinct, and from between your knuckles, 3 razor-sharp blades extended faster than you could register what was happening. Aizawa dropped the hairbrush with a clatter. You glimpsed a line of deep red welling up from his hand, which he quickly pulled back and covered with his other hand so you couldn't see it. You stared at the blades extending from your hand in shock. "Dad!" You started to panic. Are you okay? You were bleeding." "I'm fine," Aizawa assured sharply. "Don't worry. Calm down, Eiko. Deep breaths." You tried, but you were trembling, replaying over and over that moment of the blades shooting out from your hand, hurting Aizawa. You began to cry. Aizawa stepped forward to comfort you. "Stay back!" you yelled. You leapt back out of reach, the blades on your hand still extended with your warning gesture. He stopped. "I'm not going anywhere, problem child," he growled. Your PTSD seemed to be kicking in from the sight of his hurt hand, but he needed to calm you down if you were going to retract the blades. It was obviously part of your quirk, but a part that you weren't used to for some reason. He stayed with you, at a distance like you'd asked, assuring that his hand would be fine, guiding you to breathe deeply and calm down. As you eventually calmed, the blades retracted back into your hand without a mark. You stared in relief, then sank to your knees in exhaustion. "All right, problem child." You tried to be brave. Yes. But really, you were terrified. Aizawa could tell. You looked up at him. "You should go see Recovery Girl right now." Aizawa didn't want to leave you, but you wanted him to get treatment. So you compromised, and you came with him to Recovery Girl. He had you wait in the hallway so you wouldn't see his injury. Recovery Girl examined his hand with a raised eyebrow, keeping pressure on it. "Clean stab all the way through, but luckily it didn't hit any tendons or main arteries, so you'll feel good as new when this heals."
Thank you. I just need it bandaged, so Eiko doesn't see it. Recovery Girl planted a kiss on the side of his head, and he suddenly felt extra tired. There, she said briskly. Bandaging is no longer required, and the scar should be barely visible after a few days. Aizawa scowled at the way she'd done that without warning him. Thanks. Can you examine Eiko? She seems to have retractable claws as part of her quirk, but she's unfamiliar with them. Bring the girl in, Recovery Girl acknowledged. Aizawa went to the hallway and brought you to see Recovery Girl. She x-rayed your hands and examined them carefully. You tried not to act jumpy. You worried that the blades would shoot out again. You're right, Aizawa, Recovery Girl said. They're part of her quirk, retractable claws. She gave him a look, now knowing what had happened to his hand, but didn't say anything. You finally spoke up. Dad? Yes, Eiko. He watched you, eyes narrowed in thought. It seemed hard for you to say what you were about to say. I knew about the claws. You spoke softly. But I've never been able to use them, because my uncle always filed them down in the garage, with some sort of power saw. You shuddered. I guess they're long enough to use now. So that's why it was hard to say. A bad memory. Your blade-like claws seemed pretty strong. He could only imagine what you'd had to go through whenever your so-called uncle had sawed them down. All this time, and he still hadn't uncovered all the problems you faced because of what that lowlife had done to you. It was getting harder to ignore the anger building in his chest. It's okay, Eiko, he reassured. Lots of kids have experiences like this when manifesting aspects of their quirk. Now that we know, we can avoid accidents. You shivered, bracing yourself. You have to file them down, so they're too short to use. Eiko, Aizawa crouched to be eye level with you. This is your quirk. I won't take it away from you. You can't control it right now, because you've never had to before, but we'll figure this out together, okay? You nodded, eyes welling with tears again, and this time, you let Aizawa comfort you, burying your face in his chest as he wrapped his arms around you. You were safe. True to his word, Aizawa began training with you as soon as you got home. It was important to gain some level of control before any more accidents could happen. You realized that it tended to activate when you reached for things, or when you got worked up emotionally. Noticing that helped you to become more aware of the specific muscles you used to extend and retract them. Controlling it felt painstakingly tricky, but you were definitely making headway. By the time you had to leave for Shinse's mom's birthday dinner, you felt confident in your ability to avoid stabbing anyone. You'd still need to be careful, but you were getting the hang of it. Aizawa dropped you off and went to the meeting at UA. As he left the conference room, Mike fell into step beside him. It was dusky dark outside, the stars starting to speckle in the sky through the windows, but the fluorescent lights kept the hallways brightly lit. What happened to your hand? Mike exclaimed suddenly. Nothing, Aizawa growled. Mike frowned. Have you always had that scar? Aizawa changed the subject. Had any more people tailing you? Mike looked into space, thinking. No. Aizawa gave him a suspicious glance. What are you not saying? No one has followed me, but I just remembered something else. A couple of my students have been acting oddly. I haven't gotten the chance to ask them about it yet. Odd how? Not in a bad way, just in a not their usual vibe way. Only for a day, and then they went back to normal. Let me know what you find out. Aizawa scowled, picking up his walking pace unconsciously. Okay, Mike shrugged, keeping up with relaxed, big steps. Midnight suddenly caught up to them. Shota, how's Eiko? Where is she? She's at her friend's. Aizawa ignored Mike's grin. Well, I have a present for her. Midnight pushed it into his hands eagerly. A neatly wrapped box with a big broad ribbon dwarfing it. Be sure to tell her it's from Aunt Nemery.
Aizawa gave Mike an accusing look for self-proclaiming himself to be your uncle, just like Nemery was now self-proclaiming herself as your aunt. You two are impossible. He examined the box. What is it?
She'll love it.
Midnight blissfully ignored the question. Half an hour later, when Aizawa had brought you back home from Shinso's, you stared at what the present box had contained. Midnight had printed out all the photographs from your adoption day on nice, thick, matte paper. She'd even framed 2 of them in glossy white frames. She'd chosen to frame the one where she'd taken a selfie with you while Aizawa yelled at Mike in the background, and the one with just you and Aizawa, you grinning, Aizawa almost smiling. Your eyes sparkled as you gazed at the photographs.
Can these go on the wall?
Aizawa couldn't say no to the indescribable expression on your face as you stared at the photos. If you want.
Yes, I do.
You grinned suddenly, a flash of light. Aizawa noticed that the box still wasn't empty. He reached in and pulled out a thin paperback novel. A sticky note on the cover read,
"Some great literature from one girl to another."
He pulled the note off. The cover showed a couple kissing passionately. He flipped through it, scanning. It was packed with sappy phrases like, "fiery passion of tempestuous love," and terrible metaphors like, "I'm your dandruff. I just keep falling for you, no matter how much you try to get rid of me." "I think I'm going to be sick," Aizawa muttered. He noticed some borderline explicit content and snapped it shut with a scowl. "You will not be reading this, Eiko." He held up the book. You looked up, then wrinkled your nose.
Okay.
Aizawa relaxed, and with a lazy gesture, he sent the book spinning perfectly into the trash can. You smiled absently at the photos.
I definitely need to thank her for these, though.
Aizawa examined the pictures, raising an eyebrow at the choice for which ones to frame. It was late, so Aizawa sent you upstairs to get ready for bed, promising to hang the photos tomorrow. He graded papers at the kitchen table while you slept. Another ordinary, peaceful night. He leaned back in his chair when he finally marked up the last paper. He put a lot of effort into his feedback because it could speed the growth of his students, but it felt good to be done. He sighed as he stretched. His mind wandered to your question earlier this week.
Are you happy?
You were finally, definitely his. Part of his family forever after. He'd always be able to see your bright flash of a grin as you grew and discovered yourself. One day later, you got back from school, finished for the weekend. You were munching happily on a celery stick and doing your homework. Aizawa working on lesson plans across the table from you, when his phone started to ring. Mouth closed, Eiko. Aizawa reminded before answering the call. Eraserhead, are you there? Detective Tsukauchi's voice. He sounded out of breath. Yes. Aizawa frowned. We need you here. It's Taro Teshima. He's broken out of jail. Aizawa froze. What? Taro Teshima. The abusive drunk who'd raised you on the false claim that he was your uncle. We think he had help, but it's not a clean getaway. We're blocking streets to block him in, but his speed quirk is unbelievable. Even with a lot of people mobilized, we're barely keeping up. You need me to erase his quirk. We can't let him escape. Aizawa glanced at you. You munched your celery with wide, innocent eyes. Your mouth was closed this time. Where, Tsukauchi? Downtown, near the bridge. I'll be there as soon as I can. Aizawa hung up and immediately called Mike. Mike, can you watch Eiko for a little while? It's important. Well, I guess. Mike sounded taken aback. Whatever was going on, Aizawa didn't want to take chances and leave you by yourself. Whoever had helped Teshima escape was still out there. He didn't like this. Now, Mike. Right, Shoda. He heard the sounds of Mike slamming his front door behind him. Well,
I guess I can bring her to my show.
No, I don't think that would be. Aizawa scowled, but the call was cut off by Tsukauchi calling him again.
Eraserhead, he's getting away.
He spoke urgently.
Are you close?
Yes. Aizawa hung up on him. Aizawa tossed the phone to you. Eiko, call Mike, and keep talking to him until he gets here. Stay inside, and let him know if anyone tries to come in. You nodded, amber eyes wide. For a fraction of a second, he stared back at you, his messy-haired, earnest-souled kid. Then he spun around and took off into the city, using his capture scarf to rise onto the rooftops. The chase was still going on when he arrived. He wasn't too late. Taro Teshima had a lot to pay for.
Okay, I'm here.
Mike informed you cheerily through the phone. Mike's cheery attitude reassured you after Aizawa's intensity a few minutes ago. You opened the front door. You still remembered when Mike's energy and loudness had scared you. Now, it seemed comfortingly familiar. Hi, Mike. You smiled up at him. He grinned back, hanging up on the phone. How's my favorite niece? He was fully dressed in his hero costume, leather, boots, hair gel, and he still gestured with the energy of everything he said. Mike. Suddenly, you felt really glad he was there, and in 2 quick steps you reached him and wrapped your arms around his waist. Once he recovered from his surprise, he crouched a bit and hugged you back. You'd never hugged him before. I'm happy to see you, you muttered. The feeling is mutual, kid, Mike assured. He stepped into the house with you. How's the guitar coming? After a bit of ordinary conversation, Mike explained that he was scheduled to DJ a major event on live TV in a short while, and asked if you'd be up for coming with him. His infectious grin persuaded you. You smiled back hesitantly. Okay. 20 minutes later, you stayed close to Mike's side as you entered a huge room packed with people. Mike seemed to fit right into the scene. The loud music, the dimness and mist lasered with beams of colored lights, the loud voices overlapping. Even above all the noise, Mike was audible without effort as he greeted several people with quick and complex custom handshakes. Everyone seemed to know him, and they reflected his energy back at him. Mike was soaking all of it in, exploding with it. You could tell. He led you around the stage entrance where all the DJ equipment sat above the crowd. You breathed out a sigh of relief, glad you weren't packed into a sea of people anymore. Here, kid! Mike yelled excitedly, lifting you up by the waist and setting you in the DJ chair. You gazed at all the dials and slider switches. Mike began showing you a few basic things, and he let you DJ for a while. You grinned. It was all a little too loud and crowded, but it was actually kind of fun. Whew. Coming up in the next part, Aizawa is not going to be pleased that Mike brought Eiko to a rave. Especially once he realizes that Teshima's escape was a distraction designed to separate you from him. Will Mike be able to keep you safe? Find out in Part 9, next Thursday. And be sure to check the description for the link to the next part, because I'll definitely put it there once it's uploaded. Previous chapters also linked below, as well as Discord, Wattpad, and Instagram. I'm looking forward to your comments, and I hope you are all having a wonderful day. Thank you for being so kind and supportive. I want to echo that sentiment back to you. Take care of yourselves, get enough sleep, and know that I care about how you're doing. Anya K out. Until next time.